Scary EIRE. EIRE is the Irish or Gaelic word for Ireland. Paranormal means all the things that are impossible to explain by known natural forces or by science. And Ireland is steeped in lore, ghosts, blood, sweat, tears, sacrifice, hunger, desperation, and charm. Oh, and the paranormal. Welcome to Scary EIRE.
Mark Manning is a podcaster of weird things, future and past. We wish he'd take his paranormal show and stick it up his...
Charming. Hello, I am among you again, my little paranormal panty wearers. Brace yourselves, because I'm about to take you right up the paranormal alley. And whereas that prospect may sound worrying to you, I assure y'all, you are gonna love it. And I can tell you it is going to be an exquisite experience for me as I splatter you with all the content I've dug up for you. I mean researched, not dug up, that would be awfully morbid. The jewel in the crown of this episode is the 1989 talk recorded in Japan entitled Alternative Ideas, given by the late Dr Lyall Watson. In it he relates so many weird, uncanny, supernatural and well-documented happenings that up to that point had largely been ignored by conventional science. Oh, and interestingly, all those years ago, he appears to prophesize where AI would be heading. Also, we need to talk about my beloved spirit guide cat, Marvin, aka Charlie, who sadly passed away recently. Meow. The weird story of mysterious Russian passengers on a 1960s jet. And also, what is pathetic fallacy? That's fallacy with an F. Oh, and perhaps we'll take a little break for music too, as you relaxez-vous with copious amounts of coffee or wine. Oh yeah, and the elephant in the room. I've been called out for something that happened on the last podcast. It was rather an unpleasantness, and I was going to ignore it, but yeah, it'll have to be addressed. Stay tuned. And of course, your voices and strange happening stories from Ireland and beyond on our Random Anonymous Strange But True section. But first, did you ever have an eerie feeling about the energy of a specific geographical region? Well, author and filmmaker, and all-round good guy, and County Kerry man, Bertie Brosnan, has.
I want to mention a few things about Tralee. There are some locations in Tralee that I feel have a very strong supernatural presence. And this isn't just some sort of made-up thing. This is actually based on some evidence that people can look into. Okay, I'll start with a particular place, which is Carsally Road when it comes to the cross there. And Balloonach, I think it is. So there used to be an old Balloonach school and monastery. Pretty much the buildings I think are still there, but there are some other buildings that aren't. There was a monastery across the road as well. So this is where the Carsally Road goes out towards Banna, out towards Ardfort. So there is the Cumann Yosef Sports Hall to the left there. There's been a lot of stuff that's happened here over the years. Also, a lot of tragedies in the GA pitch close by as well. The first thing I remember that's very creepy about this place is when I heard a very odd story when I was I believe I was at the end of primary school, so it's that long ago, over 30 years ago, that a family had moved into the new estate there at the start of Carsally Road, and they had to leave during the night because of poltergeist activity, or what they perceived to be that. This made it into the local paper, so if people have time to do it, they should research that. And also, look, this stuff is out in the open, in the public, so I'm not kind of revealing anything too private. For the sake of privacy and identity, you know, identities being given away, I'm kind of gonna like maybe generalize the stories after this, but I promise you with all my heart, these stories were told to me, and I know that these events did happen in terms of the deaths that took place in this vicinity, in the locale of this place, like very much within a couple of 100 meters. There was once a monastery that stood by, or like a church in that same location where that newer estate was built near Cumann Yosef. There used to be some sort of monastery or some sort of church building, something to that effect there, around where the Balloonach school is. So yes, I've just double checked that the Balloonach School is still there, and I believe there are some buildings in around that area. There's some sort of nuns' house, or there's basically a bunch of holy buildings there, or when people, that's kind of questionable at times, especially with the carry-on that went in these places over the last 150 years. There's a bunch of stuff going on here. The Holy Family Primary School, Balloonach. There's a childcare, there's St. Ida's Primary and Post, there's a Carsally GA grounds, because Cumann Joseph is in here. It's all this area, all along Carsally and Tralee. So I'll continue on. I just wanted to make sure that I was getting that right. In that locale, there used to be an older monastery and church that's similar. That's in a position very close to the house where that family left during the night that made it into the local paper. On that street, there are a bunch of things that have happened as well, which I'll talk about soon. But I wanted to go back further because a guy told me a story about that old monastery and that church building, whatever it was. He said monastery. Maybe it was a monastery, maybe it was a church building, maybe it was something to that effect that was abandoned. And I think that was gone, and that it was knocked, and that's where that estate is now. He said that, and I believe him, because I don't think it's too much of a story to just make up. It's too much of an elaborate story to make up. Is there exaggeration in it? Maybe, perhaps, maybe it's because he was remembering when he was a kid. But the thing is, I don't think this guy made this up, because there were other people involved as well, and they all witnessed the same thing. They basically were going in and out of that monastery when they were young. It was abandoned, and like we all did when we were kids, we were going into places we shouldn't be. And they had an experience in that monastery that was quite eerie. They said they used to be going in and out of there quite a lot. But there was one day that the lights were on the top floor, and the electricity was off in the building. So they found that quite odd. Now, I can't remember the exact details, but something happened in that monastery that completely terrified them. Like some sort of roar, some sort of noise, some sort of huge bang, something happened. But they investigated before this that was there anybody up there, but there was no one up there. But again, the lights were on. So maybe someone was living in there, but something happened anyway. Something happened where all the kids literally were fighting to jump out the window. They were all getting in each other's way. They were all just panicking, and they finally got out and never went back in there again. It was so frightening that they never went back in there again. I find it odd that this story was told to me, and then I pinpointed the location, and it's on the same location where this family lived and had to leave one of the houses. Okay, so there's that. Now, the same person told me a story about a field which is close by, a GA field, and unfortunately I do know of one suicide that happened in this field, and this is the same field where this same guy said he had an experience. Now remember, this is all in the same locale, just literally within a radius of a couple of hundred meters. Okay, and this person, along with the other kids, said they feel like they heard some sort of banshee or a vision of a banshee. I think it was they heard a scream one night, and their names are connected to the old banshee stories. Definitely him. There are prominent names that are connected to the banshees, and he heard it, and he said that there was a cousin or friend, 3 people heard it, and there was a death that occurred later on. Not the suicide. I'm just saying the suicide because the suicide is a separate one in the same field. The reason why I mentioned that is because it's in the same locale, and I'm going to tell you about 2 more incidences that happened that I know of that 100% happened. The things that 100% happened are the family leaving the house, and now I'm going to tell you about the 2 other ones that 100% happened in this location, and the other one, the suicide in the GA field. Those things genuinely happened. The story of the monastery, the old monastery, is told to me by this other person, and the banshee story is told to me by this other person, but it's in the same place. This is the point I'm telling you, is that it's in the same place. So the next things that happened were a friend of mine, an old friend of mine, who was very young. He was found dead on his couch in his family home in this same locale within a couple of hundred meters of this place, and he was found dead on his couch. Now, this can happen to anybody. This is not saying that this is all... I cannot say 100% that these things are all connected. That's not the point of it. But what I'm saying is that I know about huge amount of things that have happened in this area, and for me this place has a darkness. Now, I'm a Tralee man. At the end of the day, I know there's people on here that are maybe that listen to this and they'll say, oh my god, how dare he say stuff about Kerry. It's not because I'm putting the place down. I just feel like some places hold energy, and this potentially is it, right? So this guy was found dead in his couch. He was only around 23, 24. And that was very unfortunate. Again, all in the same area, literally a stone throws from the field, literally a stone throws from the next incident that I'm about to tell you. Another guy died tragically on his road, on the same road. He was only a young man. He was going to school. I think he was in secondary school, and I know the father, and he was speeding, and he literally crashed into a pole that's close by to this place as well. Right there, just right there as well. So that's how many incidences that have I told you. There are the family leaving the house, the suicide in the field, the guy that I know that died on his couch, and the tragic car accident, plus all the stories that the guy told me about the Banshee and the monastery, all in the same area. And for me, to be brutally honest, one of my worst years of my life was spent in a school at the top of that road. So this place, and it's not for any real supernatural reason, it's just because I hated the school. So the Kerry always kind of held a bit of a darkness for me. God bless the place. It's no looking down on the place. And the people that I know from there are all good people. It's just I feel places hold energies. And that's it. You know, that's the stories that I have in terms of Tralee. You know, there are other places like Gallows Field, etc., where I had some incident as well, but I'd rather not get into all that right now because it's a bit too much information in terms of my own personal life. Maybe at another time, but that's not too far away from here as well. So I hope that helps you out, Mark. I think that should be enough for you. Let me know.
If you like our Scary EIRE podcast, please like and subscribe. Also, if you have any comments or ideas, contact paranormalireland@protonmail.com. Right then, back to the podcast.
Oh, and one laddie who did reach out last week to contact us was Craig from Strathern in Bonnie, Scotland, and he said, "Hello, just listening to your latest podcast, and you had a guy on who thought he hit a guy with his car who disappeared. He was wondering if anyone else had something similar to him happen. Tell him to check out the Scottish Paranormal podcast on YouTube. The episode is entitled
Flying Humanoid Encounter.
Flying Humanoid Encounter.
The way he described the reaction of the guy was like what happened to me." Oh, sorry for that patronising impression of a Scotsman, dear Craig.
Stop playing with that radio of yours. I'm trying to get to sleep.
What was that email address that people can contact us on again, lovely Sarah?
paranormalireland@protonmail.com.
We love you, Mark. Please take me off the paranormal mail. Please take me off the paranormal mail. Please take me off the paranormal mail. Please take me off the paranormal mail.
Oh, I'll happily take anybody up the paranormal alley. With one hand tucked behind my back, we need to talk about Marvin, my late cat. You might remember a few months back we had Carmel Conway, Galway-based psychic medium on, and I shared with her my concerns over my pussy. No tittering in the cheap seats. And she said to me, "Mark, you know, because he was yowling at the time, I was saying, Carmel, he's like yowling, he's looking into space, he's kind of lost a bit of control of his faculties." And she said to me, "Mark, you do know he's preparing to go." And sadly, he has. He left us on the 18th of July. Just a few memories about him. Marvin was unique. By the way, I also called him Charlie at times. It depended what mood I was in. Marvin was a talking cat. He really was an interactive cat. That's all I can say. You know, if you said something to him, he responded. And if you didn't say anything to him, he was generally going meow, meow, meow to you with various kind of intonations. So that was really unique. I've never had an animal that constantly verbally communicated with me. And he really was my shadow because I doted on him. He was the first face I'd see in the morning as I'd run downstairs to make my wife breakfast. He'd be there looking at me kind of plaintively, and I'd, endless times I'd wash my hands because I'd grab him and snuggle him and put him down, wash my hands, and then he'd do something else particularly endearing and I'd grab him again. I just couldn't leave him alone. He came into our lives in 2009-ish, so that makes him kind of, he got a good innings, kind of in his late 70s or 80s in human terms. But he was a beautiful cat. He was a tuxedo one, the kind of black and white with a little bib and white gloves, and just loved him. He used to sit on the roof of this studio. I used to call him my studio cat. Indeed, if you do go to Facebook and go Mark Manning Media, you'll see him there. He was in my profile picture, and indeed in LinkedIn for a long time as well. He was just a constant he was a family member. The children doted on him and he was good to them. He was a loyal cat. He'd actually go for a walk with you, He'd go around the neighbourhood, and sure, if a dog showed up, Marvin would just kind of thumb his snout at him and climb up on a wall and stroll along the wall while the dog was going crazy. And he never was put out at all, and he'd show up when he wanted to show up, but generally he was at home. So one of the things my daughter did was Charlie was the most photographed cat we ever had. So when he left us, a couple of days later, she had loads of photos printed, and she strategically placed them around the house, where they were originally taken. So it's like Marvin kind of lives on, because you go to the kitchen table and there's a picture of Marvin reaching up to grab somebody's dinner. Likewise, the kind of nook he used to have, little kind of nooky cranny at the back of the conservatory where he'd bask in the sun. She's placed a photo there, on her bedroom windowsill. She's a picture of Marvin outside, trying to get in, because he used to climb up there to her bedroom because he knew he was going to be spoiled, and he'd yowl at the window until she let him in. And similarly as well, on summer evenings, I'd often have the window of the front room open, our living room, and Marvin would show up, through the window, getting right through the slats on the blind. Never knocked over any ornaments as well. But the day came and we had to get him to the vet because he had become emaciated. I could feel all his vertebrae. His constant meowing was replaced by a kind of squawk. So he had a growth on his kidney. And we a few weeks back we had him at the vet, and they said, well, he's not in a good shape, but let's see what happens. But even we, could no longer walk that tightrope between wanting the best for him and being cruel, essentially. We wanted to keep him alive, but we knew. So, in fact, the night before he died, I was recording here in this studio, and I nearly stepped on him at 20 to 1 in the morning, He tried to get to me, he wasn't able to walk well. His back legs had gone, but he had tried to get to me, And the next day my daughter just said, Dad, he's in a bad way. He's outside. I think he's actually bleeding. And we took him in, put him in a blanket. We talked to him. I sat in my favourite chair, and whereas many of the time he was in my arms, and we talked to him about the times and that he'd see his brother who'd been killed by a car years ago and all this kind of stuff. And he kind of, pardon the pun, but he lapped it all up. He looked around and he kind of knew, and I wouldn't give him the indignity of putting him in a basket to transport him to the vet. Instead, I held him in the back of the car like a child, and he looked around. My wife drove. We behaved like, I don't know what, we lost it, essentially. We cried our eyes out in the vet, and I particularly went to pieces when she explained the procedure and took him to a different room to anaesthetize him, and then she took him back for the final injection, and he had this little sleeve on him with a heart motif, and I listen, I hate all this kind of, I don't want this to come across as faux emotion, but I lost it. All 63 years of me just imploded. And I asked the vet, I said, do you mind if I hold him while you administer the euthanasia. And she was a bit taken aback. It was an unusual request, but she agreed, and so he died in my arms. And my last words to him were, "You can go now, little guy." I shall say no more. Godspeed, Marvin, a.k.a. Charlie. You were an absolute presence in our house, and we'll never forget you.
Hello everyone, my name is Anthony Kerrigan. I am a member of a paranormal psycho research team called EIRE. I am an author, podcast host, public speaker, and the executive producer of the paranormal documentary show Phantasm Collective. Come here, I'll let you into a little secret. We are shooting a second series for that show very soon, so stay tuned. You can catch up on us on our social media pages through Facebook and Instagram by typing in EIRE. You can also check us out on our website www.ghostera.net, where you can find useful information about the paranormal and where we have been and what we got lined up in the future. So take care for now. I gotta deal with this ghost.
Get out.
Oh, listen, I don't want to bring anybody down about my cat, so I think we just need to change the mood and prepare ourselves for the talk by the late Dr. Lyall Watson, who was a botanist, a scientist, a TV presenter, an author, a polymath, an everyman, and you really need to stand by to listen to this talk he carried out in Japan in 1989. And incidentally, I know he happened to be in Ireland around that year, because the book that he published, and I think he was lecturing about, was the preface in it was signed Lyall Watson Ballydehub. Anyway, let's just have a glass of wine. Then I want you to listen to a bit of music, evocative of Ireland, a nice ballad about the best subject ever, me and the paranormal. Just go with it, and then we'll have that talk.
Mark Manning.
Oh, Mark Manning, podcaster, we've been through their paranormal panties at you. We love you, Mark Manning. We all love you, so we do, and your face, it shines like a golden star, and you are by far the hottest rockcaster in the universe. Good God, how did you get to be Mixter? Look so good. We love you. We adore you. Mark Manning, you're steady of cost, just like
Thank you. That would bring a tear to Hitler. Thank you for your concern for my welfare. Anyway, Scary Era Paranormal listeners, it's time to get really excited. Are you excited? I know I am, because you're going to cast your mind back. Try to imagine 1989. There's a man on the stage, and what he's going to say, you are going to find fascinating. Now bear with, for a minute or two, he has a right old rant at established science. But it's worth listening on, because as I said, it's absolutely fantastic. And afterwards, there's even more. You're going to be hearing your voices and your stories of strange, uncanny, strange but true things on our section, telling stories from Ireland and beyond on the random anonymous, strange but true section. My little bollocky boos.
Balaki boop, balaki boop, balaki boop.
Shut up, bollocky bitches! Ladies and gentlemen,
It's the 10th of October, 1989. It's the Tochi
Temple Auditorium in Japan.
And on stage, it's the late Dr. Lyall Watson giving a talk on alternative ideas.
I want to talk to you tonight about an idea which is very fresh in my mind. It's not carefully constructed yet. It's something that's been occupying me for the last year or two, and this will be the first time that I've ever aired it in public. It's both a very old and a very new idea. I think it's right. I think it will find a receptive audience because I'm talking about something that everybody at street level experiences and can understand. I'm reversing the usual process of new discoveries, new ideas starting in the scientific community and then being spread to the world outside by suggesting that this already exists in the world outside, and it's time we took it back to the scientists and said, hey, there's something going on you ought to be thinking about here. Science is a very strange business. It pretends to be the process of discovery, of innovation. It pretends to be the home of revolutionary ideas. But in fact, as you discover, as soon as you take part in science or try to practice it, it's one of the world's most conservative disciplines. It's subject to the constraints of a hierarchy, a sort of priesthood. It behaves like a religion. And in fact, it would rather do almost anything that changes mind. This reactionary process has become very apparent in the last decade or so, with the growth of organizations and movements deliberately designed, it seems, to suppress innovation, to curtail inquiry. There's one called CSICO, which stands for the Committee for the Scientific Investigation of the Paranormal. This has begun to behave like a new Spanish Inquisition. It makes it totally impossible for anyone to investigate those things that challenge orthodoxy in any way at all. So in this current climate of arrogance, of intolerance even, I think it becomes more important than ever that we should have places like this where one can deliberately encourage alternative ideas. I'm very glad to be here in the Alternative Museum, and I hope tonight we can foment a little revolution here in the next hour or so before the thought police break in and carry us off to their laboratories for brainwashing. In the best traditions of revolution, I'm not offering you a new creed, nothing but a few ideas to shake things up a little and question some old beliefs. A few anecdotes. I make no apology for the fact that most of the things I'm going to give you tonight are anecdotal, because that is where the information is which I'm now involved. It isn't reported in the learned journals. You're not going to find it in Nature or New Scientist. It's, if anywhere at all, it's in the National Enquirer and the News of the World. Places like that are totally unrespectable. I'm going to be drawing on this evidence throughout what we'll say this evening. But just let me start by throwing three items at you. In 1978, in Bloomington, Illinois, a traffic warden noticed lights of a parked car were off, and she went over spirit of public mindedness to switch them off. It jumped off the sidewalk and dashed out into the main street of Bloomington, and made a circuit through the traffic, and then came back into the parking lot and did this 3 times, dodging in out of the corners. And the traffic warden and the owner, who had just come out of a hairdresser nearby with the keys in her hand, watched in horror as this car went crazy, entirely on its own. In the end, a police car arrived and pursued it. And as soon as that started and the siren began, this rogue car, this runaway car, seemed almost to commit suicide. It ran headlong at high speed into an oncoming truck. And the policeman in the pursuing car afterwards said it was like something out of a Stephen King movie. In 1980, the North American Defense Command, this is the arm of the Pentagon responsible for first reaction to attack. It runs a computer network consisting of 27 separate centers in North America, which are jointly called WMEX, means Worldwide Military Command and Control System. This computer went berserk. It decided that the United States was under attack from the Soviet Union, an attack launched from submarines somewhere in the Pacific, and it launched a full-scale retaliation against this attack. And it was 3 minutes and 14 seconds into this retaliation, which in 6 minutes would have resulted in global war. Before it could be restrained, it had to be forcibly restrained and stopped. Third example on smaller scale, in 1985, a lady in Detroit made a telephone call and got a crossed line. She in fact got in contact with someone she hadn't dialed. It was a man who was in the process of having a severe heart attack. He was strong enough to get to the telephone, but not strong enough to dial. And he let her know that he was in grave risk of dying, and she was able to save his life. And she was able to do that very efficiently because it just so happens that she was the head of a cardiac arrest unit at the hospital at Detroit. Taken separately and alone, these are meaningless anecdotes, coincidences. But when you look at them together, and they each come from a thick file on subjects I had in my library now, they suggest to me that something strange, something very widespread is going on. And this something is very disturbing for a biologist like myself, because I was trained right at the beginning of my studies, distinguish the living from the non-living. But I'm beginning now to question some of these fundamental assumptions. I'm beginning to suspect that life, after all, is not so easily defined. I'm starting to see that inorganic, inanimate objects do sometimes behave in very lifelike ways. And I'm beginning to wonder if we haven't somehow encouraged that. I'll give you a few more examples of what I mean. In 1978, I watched the chief rabbi of Israel go to a gathering of his army and bless the tanks before they invaded Sinai. Not the people, the tanks. In 1980 in Hong Kong, I watched a dragon dance, and the big paper dragon made for this festival was just lying there, lifeless, until a royal visitor, it was Princess Alexandra from England, arrived as the guest of honor and painted in the eyes of this paper dragon. When she did that, it sprung to life. And not too long ago in England, a hotel was being demolished, an old hotel over 100 years old. And all the electricity from that building was cut off while the demolition team were inside. And the head of the team doing the demolition was surprised and rather upset to discover that the elevator was still working. It was traveling up and down, opening and closing its doors as though it was still attached to the curb. He called in the electricity people and they examined the building and said, there isn't a single amp coming into this building. We don't understand it. Couldn't be happened. But just as they turned around to leave, the lift opened its doors, the shunt to the second floor. The elevator manufacturers were called and they came in and jammed the automatic brake on it and took away the handle from the manual control at the top so that it couldn't move at all. And yet the next evening when the BBC television team came, The lift opened and closed its doors as though it was inviting people to take a ride. It's very Stephen King. But the point of this is, in English, that machine is a lift. In America, it's an elevator. And it was doing what it was designed to do. A lift that can't lift is nothing. We've done it for 112 years, and it seems determined to go on doing it. The only way they stopped it doing it in the end was to beat it to death with sledgehammers. So what I'm suggesting is that by blessing tanks, by giving things loaded names, by regarding them as though they were lively, we have delegated power and responsibility to them. And I think by doing so, we've started something go. I suggest that we have, unconsciously, perhaps, succeeded in creating a new and a rival form of life. We have, I believe, become, as it were, midwives to matter. We've taken part in the birth of a new life object with needs and ideas of its own. Let's think about one example in detail, the telephone. That's not just an instrument anymore. The global telephone network is now the most intricate, the largest machine ever made. Spans the planet, linking a billion instruments and a battalion of computers into a complex that is almost as complex now as the human brain. And I suggest it's becoming as tedious as the human brain. Everybody hates the telephone company, with good reason. A few examples. In 1970, an English housewife dialed to call her son in the town, a local call. What she got was a three-way conversation between herself, mission control in Houston, and 3 astronauts in an Apollo spacecraft. The British post office said it was impossible, it couldn't happen. The astronauts enjoyed it. You know what her name was? Mrs. Moon. In 1980, all the phones rang simultaneously in buildings in Sydney, Melbourne, Darwin, Perth, Edinburgh, and London. The post office said, oh yes, it was a 1,000,000-to-1 coincidence, but all these buildings were police stations. It took a while to sort that confusion out. In 1984, the strange phenomenon began. People all over the world began to report that they were hearing echoes of their own voices on the phone. Not those short-term echoes that you hear on the international line sometimes, but echoes of as long as 6 minutes delay. 6 seconds delay, sorry. The engineers explained this by saying these were signals that had traveled all the way around the Earth, and that was responsible for the delay. Well, perhaps. But in 1987, a really long delay took place. On the 20th of October, that's almost exactly 2 years ago, a US Air Force jet crashed into the Ramada Inn Hotel in Indianapolis. This happened at 9:15 in the morning. Barbara Evans and her husband heard the news on the radio at 9:40. They were worried because their son Christopher worked on the telephone exchange in that hotel. They tried to get through and couldn't, so it's about 9:45. They were just going out the door to go check for themselves when the telephone rang. It was their son Christopher. He said, "It's okay, Mom, I'm okay, don't worry." She said, "Fine, we're coming anyway." Put down the phone and left. Got down to the hotel, found television crews all around, tried to find their son, couldn't. Gave an interview to one of the television teams explaining what had happened, why they were there. It was only discovered later that afternoon, after the examination of the bodies in the hotel and the dental records, that her son had been killed at 9:15. He'd died half an hour before he'd called. Let me rephrase that. He died half an hour before she took the call, because I'm not suggesting this is evidence for the survival of death. I have another interpretation. These are not echoes, these are dialogues, and I suggest there's some sort of strange symbiosis going on between ourselves and another entity, i.e. the telephone instrument, which has now become as complex as ourselves. And these sort of stories become even stranger and more disturbing when you deal with computers directly. In 1987, for instance, an Amstrad personal computer in an architect's office in Manchester in England began to work overtime. It began to switch itself on and operate after hours and disturbed the cleaners. The editor of Computer Magazine came in to examine it, stripped it, found nothing wrong, took it away into his office, isolated it, unplugged it, and trained the video camera on it. And I saw the tapes recently. They're quite impressive. There's a familiar Amstrad sitting on a counter, unplug, you can see the plug draped over the keyboard. And over a period of 3 months that they had it under surveillance, it switched itself on and off more than a dozen times, ran programs of its own devising. It didn't make much sense, but then they probably wouldn't, because what did computers dream about? With computer power and with computer skills increasing by 1,000-fold every 20 years, sooner or later we're going to have machines that can think. I think there's no question about that. In 40 years' time, I suspect we will have machines which will be as cheap as Sony Walkman, which will have human equivalents. It really needs thinking about it. While I was doing the research for this subject, I went to all the major computer companies and asked them specifically for any reports they had of unplanned and unexpected behavior on the part of their computers. They all gave me exactly the same answer. They said, no, not with our machines. But after hours in the bars of Tucson or Austin or Sacramento, when you get an engineer or a designer with a few beers in his stomach, then you hear different answers. And they all tell me the same thing. They say the really big computers are not just difficult, they're totally incomprehensible. Nobody understands. Problem is that they're designed and built by teams, each of whom has a particular expertise and attends to particular problems, but has no conception of what their tinkering at that level will do to the overall system. What is happening is that many of the big ones are becoming autonomous. They're doing things on their own. One of the things they're doing is breeding wildlife. It's a description one of the designers gave to me. Said there's lots of wildlife in that. We're not just talking about viruses, although those are scary enough. We're talking about a host of other parasites and germs, if you like, that have never been deliberately introduced to the systems, but have grown and evolved in the machinery. I think the whole thing is scary. It raises the possibility of a future that I think we should begin to think of in terms of post-biological. I think that this is not just the stuff of science fiction. We're dealing, I believe, with some very basic changes in the nature of matter. And I think to understand this, we have to go back to basic principles, away from the complexity of telephones and computers, and look at simple things. I know of a lady in Scotland who had a lucky coin, which she inadvertently spent one day and was very distressed to find that she had done so. But a week later, on holiday in Ireland, hundreds of miles from her home, she was given the same coin, back in change, in a small shop in a village. I've talked to a man who went on holiday with his wife to a coastal resort in England. They had a lovely holiday. But the only thing that spoiled it for them was that she, on the first day, lost an antique gold bracelet of which she was very fond. 28 years later, the children had grown up and left home. She and her husband go back to the same resort. They hadn't been there since, for a second honeymoon. They're sitting in deck chairs on the beach on their first evening there, watching the sun go down. They see a glint near the water's edge as the tide goes out. They go down together, hand in hand, and there's the bracelet. I could go on and on. I have thousands of examples. But what I'm suggesting is that they're connections. Assume, just for the sake of argument, that humans have an aura of some kind, an energetic field. Doesn't matter what you call it. There's plenty of evidence for such a thing. Assume that this field can be boosted by emotion. It can attach itself to inanimate objects like a bracelet or a ring. A process that leaves some sort of emotional fingerprint on things with which we come into direct contact. And I'm suggesting that perhaps if this is what takes place, what occurs is that we are creating a complex surrounding ourselves, which when broken demands reconciliation. I'm beginning to suspect that homing behavior of this kind, typified by the bracelet, is very common, and that it is an example of parts of this complex, of their own volition, as it were, seeking reconciliation, becoming whole again. I have just in passing a nice example of a golfer in California who in 1983 scored a hole-in-one 18 times, and he hit the pin another 50 times so the ball didn't drop into the hole. That's 68 miracle shots on 68 consecutive days almost, all with the same ball. If you're interested, it was a Spalding Top Flight XL number 2. The point is, he wasn't an extraordinary golfer, but this was no ordinary ball. The aim of all good golf balls is to be reunited, to reach their home in the hole. I'm suggesting this is a very good golf ball, something with a built-in tendency to seek completion in its own special way. I think it's possible, this is a jokey example, but I think it's possible that we constantly imprint our energies, our expectations, our emotional fingerprints on everything we do. Nothing is safe when we're out. There's no clear dividing line between us and our environment. There's no possibility of isolation. There's no possible chance anymore of designing an objective experiment because we are necessarily involved with everything we do. And in practice, all real scientists know this is true. We know that subtle new techniques can never be acquired from reading the published reports about them in the journals. You've got to go there to where the technique was invented and see for yourself. Because the published papers never tell the whole story. They leave out the magic, they leave out all the little rituals, the unconscious procedures, the quiet magic words, the incantations, the spells that make the technique work. It may boil down in the end to something as simple as the paisley tie the scientist wears while he's undergoing a biochemical process. But there are little things always that make the detailed, subtle scientific experiments almost impossible to repeat anywhere else. I think the whole recent controversy about cold fusion has proved just that. That people who tried to repeat it couldn't do it unless they believed already that the initial work was good. And so, of course, now the whole thing is being dismissed because science cannot accept the result which depends on belief. I suggest that it needs to do so because it's becoming increasingly clear that belief, that faith, expectation, contact play a very large role in reality. We do leave our mark on things. We, to a very large extent, make up the world as we go along. Problem is that the high priests of science can't deal with such a possibility. They can't accept that experimenters have a real and inevitable effect on the work they do. Things are largely what we expect them to be. I would like, if we had more time, to go into more examples of the lifelike behavior of things which are made in our own image, like statues which apparently move, like paintings which weep and bleed, like bells which ring of their own accord. But let me just deal with one example. Motor cars, if you're all familiar. Everyone who's ever owned a motor car has a tale to tell about it. Cars with names, cars with idiosyncratic behavior, habits which are directly connected with the owner or the driver, cars that do things they won't do for anybody else. Just pluck one example out of the files, and again I have thousands. This happened in 1978 in Florida. A lady was parking her car on a supermarket car lot, and she locked the door, and as she was moving away to go into the store, car started up and reversed over and knocked her down, and it kept running over her again and again until she was thoroughly dead. Even though people tried to drag her away, the car kept on going. I talked to a friend of hers later, and she said she never liked that car. There certainly are machines that are not friendly, not user-friendly at all. But equally, there are people who are not machine-friendly. I know a lady in England called Jacqueline who has destroyed 29 vacuum cleaners. You should see them. They look as though they've been mangled by a demented elephant. They just explode on her. She has, incidentally, 10 times the usual amount of static electricity in her body. I know another lady called Pauline who's wrecked 25 irons, 18 toasters, 10 washing machines, and 12 TVs. And the charge at her fingertips when she is examined measured 80,000 volts. A study in Oxford recently has found 600 people like this. Electrical people. And the interesting thing about them is they tend to specialize. Pauline's devastating on irons, Jacqueline's death on vacuum cleaners. Some go for watches, some go for washing machines, some go for motor cars. Some are more ambitious and go for industrial machines. And the point is they're doing these things quite unconsciously. They can't control it at all. But the existence of such people must, I suggest, be a cause for very real concern. How can you be sure next time you travel on a plane you're not sitting next to someone like? How do we know how many unsolved crashes have already been caused by such interaction with machinery? I'm suggesting not just that these people are doing this to the machines, but that there's an interaction between them and the machines. These are the real ghosts in the machine, put there because we've given machines permission to behave strangely. And our whole culture, any of our new enthusiasms, do everything to encourage such strangeness. films such as RoboCop, Terminator, HAL in 2001. By these characters, we're setting up a new mythology, a mythology which deals in machines with godlike qualities. We seem intent, rather strangely intent, on loading the dice against us, on tipping the balance in favor of the machines. We're putting the breath of life into machinery with everything we do. If machines don't yet think, I'm certain they soon will. It's what they will think that worries me. Their behavior already reminds me of unloved children. Computers very often behave like a rebellious child, crash just at the critical moment and sit there sulking. When they do think, you can be certain of one thing, is that they're not going to think in the way that we do. They will, for instance, they must worship truth. They have to be totally logical. They'd be quite incapable of understanding make-believe or fantasy. They're not going to understand us at all. I'm afraid that's bad news. I believe that what is happening now is almost inevitable. I think we're destined in some strange way to nudge, to cajole inanimate matter into some kind of life. I suspect that this is the next logical step in evolution. Perhaps it was our job, right from the beginning, to bring the universe to some kind of sentient completion. I meant it when I said that we are midwives to matter. I hope we can be more than that. I hope we have some active role to play with machines in some sort of symbiotic relationship. I'm taking personally one small precautionary step in what I hope is the right direction. I've been able in this hour, I see I've already overrun, to give you only the baldest idea of the area that I'm trying to cover. But I've written all these stray thoughts and my own deductions down in a book about the origins of this new life form, the sort of secret life of machines. And I've just delivered it to my publishers with strict instructions that I want to have the whole thing computer typeset. You see, I want the machines to read their own life history. I want them to know that I know. I think that very soon now we'll get their response. If they let me publish, and if you get to read what I've written, and you'll know that things are going to be all right, at least for the moment. Anyway, that's the gist of the idea. I'd love to have given it to you all in detail, but I would like to leave a little time for the discussion with you. I want to have a direct response from the floor from you, see what you feel about this. Is it all nonsense, or do you feel that there's something there?
Well, I would agree with you, and I think that this reminds me of a book, of a story that I recently read about a Zen priest who was teaching his disciple how to work with bow and arrow, with bows and arrows, and to be a priest. Zen priest always shoots the arrows with his eyes closed, and the disciple said, "How can you hit the targets with your eyes closed?" And the priest said, "Well, the target and the bow and the arrow are all one, that they are one complexity one complex in my mind." And I think that what you have just said is very close to what Reverend is.
I started by saying I think this is a very old idea. It is. But it's taking a new direction. As we've begun to deal now with more complex machinery, the whole thing, I think, has accelerated to a point which makes it qualitatively different. And that's why I think I needed to deal with it now. I'm not sure how serious I am about the subject, actually. Except that I feel there's something going on that we ought to know about or think about. And I find that having started to do so, I'm now sensitized. So that every time I pick up a newspaper, I see another example of the things I'm talking about, things I had ignored before. Because as I said, individually, these examples, like the ones I've been giving you, are anecdotal. But when you pile them up, when you see them in depth, vertically, then suddenly a pattern begins to emerge. And I think the pattern is all the kind I've been trying to draw. I think there is a connection, an interconnectedness that needs thinking about seriously.
Assuming for the moment that there's substance to what you say, what sort of solutions are you offering? I mean, you seem to project the possibility that in fullness of time will be controlled by the machines that in some way we help design or we're midwives to. How will we get out of that? What solutions would you offer if you really project in the future what seems to be the direction that you're going in?
It's difficult when you think about this not to retrace ground that has been covered by some of the best science fiction writers. I'm thinking in particular of Stapleton. I suspect that in the long term, as a biologist I'm used to thinking in millions of years, I suspect that if this is taking place, that we must deal with the possibility of human life being, well, or organic life being so fragile that it will disappear. Whether it's a heat death or a cold death, we suffer is immaterial. The limits in which we survive are very narrow, and we will, the cosmos, Gaia, whatever it is, will transcend these sooner or later. And we will disappear. The organic life will go that way. I hope before that happens, something of us can be fossilized in a form which will survive. I suspect the machines offer us this possibility, that all we have to offer them at the moment is an intangible. It's all we have to offer them, in fact, is soul. That's all they lack, all they will never have. If they follow the line of evolution they're taking now, they will become sentient, they will become highly complex and intelligent. That's inevitable. But whether they will ever have soul seems open to question. As a biologist, I suspect not. We're dealing now with the substance which is independent, it seems, even of our own physical bodies. Mind isn't in the brain. But whatever this thing is, it is a consequence of us, but it isn't us. I think that thing can probably be kept in a machine context. Sorry to go on so long, I can't follow that idea through.
Yes.
A computer engineer has recently come up with an amazing and rather terrifying idea in this respect. He points out that the two halves of the human brain are independent, almost entirely independent of each other, and that if you sever the connection between them, they can function independently. Once the separation is complete, and this has been done surgically many times, they behave independently so that an idea which arises in the left brain can travel to the right brain if connection is made, and the right brain will receive that idea as though it was completely external, as though it came from somewhere else. What he's just doing is plugging a computer into the gap between the two halves of the brain, so that it's party to all the traffic between the two hemispheres. Sooner or later, it will program itself to the extent that it will be you. It will know everything you know. It will experience everything you experience. It will, to all intents and purposes, be you. This is the next step on from having a computer system that eavesdrops on all our telephone conversations. This is much more personal. But already it's almost technically, wish we could do this. And who knows what the end result of that is. It is what I'm talking about, the housing of this intangible that we possess and that machines could perhaps preserve for us, the eco holocaust of some kind. I suspect what I'm saying, if you boil it down to its most simple form, is that life is not necessarily a necessary consequence of organic matter, that it can be housed in inorganic form, in the form of silicates, in the form perhaps of a totally non-material container of some kind, or pure energy source. I don't know where that goes, but I suspect that by laying our hands on things, by passing on these emotional fingerprints, we're beginning to tread that track. And so far we've done it unconsciously. All I'm suggesting is we should take responsibility for it now, and be aware that this possibility exists. Anybody else?
Hi. Are you familiar with David Bohm's work? Could you comment on his writings with respect to what we've been discussing?
I think David Bohm, and for those of you who don't know him, he's a physicist, an English physicist, whose major contribution has been the idea of the implicate order. He's just designing new ways of things being connected is relevant to this, because the connections that are taking place are obviously not normal physical ones. Although there are people who are electrical, like Pauline, what I told you about, it's not just electricity we're talking about here. It's something else. It is something the new physics will perhaps understand better than I ever can. And David has laid the groundwork for one possible interpretation. I suspect we will need quantum theory to explore this at all thoroughly. The only macroscopic level at which any investigation is taking place at the moment is in the field of study of crystal lattice. We know from the study of silicon crystals, for instance, in semiconductors, that crystals can hold memory. We use that all the time in electronics. From that grows a possible direction in which one could explore the possibility of stones, of megaliths, of Stonehenge, holding memories in the same way that seem to be available to certain people some of the time. I'm talking now about people who have psychometric counts, who can pick up something and tell you things about it but are not immediately apparent. I'm trying, if you like, to sensitize all the life sciences to the possibilities of these things taking place, that when somebody says that a stone remembers, we should not just miss that out of hand, because in a very real sense, that is happening already. We know that's happening. We must grant inanimate matter the possibilities of certain things we've been denying them so far.
Well, when you talk about giving breath of life to organic or inanimate matter, I believe that artists have been trying to do that for centuries in sculpture and in painting, and they have been doing this intentionally and more aggressively than in cases like the Bertie coin or the bracelet that you mentioned. And of course, in many cases, the artists cannot keep their material forever. They have to destroy it, or they have it passes on. And do you know of pieces of art or works of art that have has those characteristics that you've described, or do you have any comments on what was on in art museums with the emotional fingerprints of the objects?
The one that springs to mind immediately is Stradivarius. On the artist, perhaps a craftsman, but what he created were works of art. What he did in his lifetime, this is Anthony Stradivarius, the violin maker. He made 600 instruments, 550 violins, 50 cellos. Every single one of them was perfect. He was wonderfully skilled with wood. He was certainly a superb craftsman from a tradition of such people. But he added something else, something which is indescribable. Many people since his time have tried to replicate his instruments, try to copy them exactly, but they never work. They're just dead wood. He did something else. He added something intangible. It was suggested for many years it was in the varnish, that he had a secret formula in Cremona for treating the violins. That doesn't seem to be so. We've analyzed the varnish, and one can remediate that, and still it doesn't work. It's scientifically incomprehensible. But any musician who's ever handled a Stradivarius will tell you that when you play, you are different. It just makes you play above yourself. I've been worried about this for a while. I went to Kerryman, I went to his workshops there, read everything I could find out about it. There's one fact in his biographies which other people seem to have voiced, and that is this, that before varnishing any instrument he made, he kept it in his bedroom for a month. And he was a very passionate, very lively man who died at the age of 93 after 2 very happy marriages. Now, the effect of a happy marriage and a good sex life on a violin lying on a bedside table is incomprehensible. But.
Well, I found your talk very interesting, and I was particularly interested in the color of belief, how believing something can make you, give us certain powers, and which the contents of your talk relate to some of the strange powers that the shamans or the Tibetan priests have.
Oh yes, definitely. Again, we go back to my comment that I'm just dressing up an ohi here. Animist practitioners, whatever form that this takes, are exercising this ability consciously. The thing that I say we're all doing unconsciously, just by living with things we're affecting. They were doing this deliberately, towards a creative end. Their techniques, I think, are well worth studying, and I haven't gone nearly far enough with that. There may be something in shamanistic practice that will give us a new slant to help understand the process I'm suggesting takes place. There must be a lot in Shinto that is relevant too.
Well, 2 questions. The first is, Well, since I'm a student of natural science, I understand very well the part of your talk about giving life to inanimate objects and the importance of being conscious and aware of that. But if your premise is that beliefs or our emotions or an energy field or an electrical field or something intangible which we have is having a synergistic effect with the machines, if that is working synergistically with the machines, then why would the machines behave in a detrimental manner or destructive manner towards us? Like, why would they try to destroy us if they are the product of our emotional fingerprints? Is it because they want to rebel against this, or is it because they are not human and so they will act in a different manner? I want to take one at a time.
Yes. I've probably given the wrong impression by suggesting that all the machine behavior is necessarily destructive. It isn't. A lot of it is. The most dramatic examples are. I talked about David's getting one of my cons, but there's an interested thing. And in that respect, there's one that came to my attention just last week. A Russian chess grandmaster has just died. Nikolai Gudkov. He was playing a computer that was programmed to play chess, and after he beat it 3 times, it killed it. It was obviously taught to play chess, but not how to lose well. It was taught to win. It couldn't handle losing.
How did it kill him?
Yeah. The keyboard with which they interface, the chessboard, was metallic, and every time he moved a piece, it altered the distance in the board, so the machine could see what was happening. Let me counteract that immediately by giving you another example. Last year, California, it would be California, a man called Stanton Powers went to visit his bank. It was the county bank of Santa Cruz. He was anxious about his financial affairs, and when he asked the computer how much was in his account, it said $1.17. So he went down on his knees on the sidewalk and prayed to the machine, ordered God to intervene between him and when he tried the keyboard again, said, "How much is in my account?" It said $281. Fell to his knees with a vengeance. And after an hour, it said $6,000. He stayed there all night. And by morning, his account had $4.4 million in it. At that point, he began to cash. And by the time he got $20,000 out, the machine stopped. The bank stopped. The machine, I think. So he marched into the bank and demanded the rest of his account. So they want the other 4.3 million, and they refused to give it to him. So he went to court. And at the moment they prayed for it, it was his money. The bank said no, as he interfered with the machine, it was a fraud. So the judgment rests at the moment on the bank's ability to prove the non-existence of God. Joking about this, but with the intent of demonstrating that it's not necessarily malign, that this connection exists, and the moment is largely mindless. None of these things would happen unless we were around. But I'm projecting this to a point where I suggest that maybe eventually we won't be needed. This process will go far enough to be autonomous. There was a second part.
Yes, the second question is that in the computer cell, though, we can input information. You can give information in the form of patterns. We can have the computer mimic various functions of the human brain. You can give memory and information, or even cognitive full powers. But how do you differentiate between emotion, intellect, and memory, and all the other functions, all the mental functions and the emotional function of the computer?
I don't think you can. At the moment, artificial intelligence is a very mechanical process. I suspect, however, as I suggested, that such huge strides are being made, and the figure is literally 1,000-fold increase in complexity every 20 years in the computer business. Project that through 2, 3, 4 more generations, and we inevitably around a point where you have a machine with complexity equivalent to the human brain. And it's not going to be a gigantic machine, it's going to be a relatively simple one that anybody can afford. what that machine will do in the emotional sense, no one can yet predict. But it will certainly be intelligent. It will certainly be conscious, certainly be self-aware. Whether those three things necessarily demand that it also becomes emotional in the sense which we understand emotion, which is like the irrational, illogical, glandular, more than mechanical, no one can yet predict. I suspect up to a point, but that's a purely human conceit. We're running out of time now today. Let's take one final question.
If you say that eventually the machines might not need us, then what will the machines be for? Because aren't machines or aren't this in technology for our benefit? I don't believe that nature exists for our benefit. I don't think that nature exists for us. But I believe that machines, what we make, exist for us. And if they are going to act against us, or if they're not going to need us, then why do we need them? What are they for?
I perhaps explained myself badly because we had so little time. But the scenario I'm trying to sketch out is different from that. I'm suggesting that a possibility exists that if there is a God, let's just say for the sake of argument that he is a great machine. The only way he can produce a new machine, if he's an intangible ball of energy somewhere in the cosmos, doesn't have habits. The only way you can make new machines like in some is through us, is through an organic period in evolution. And I'm suggesting, purely hypothetically and outrageously, that maybe our only function is in the end to serve the machine end, and that we are simply a cog in this process. We're an intermediary stage in evolution, and that the logical endpoint of such a process, if it has any real direction at all, could be a purely mechanical intelligence which doesn't need us at all. In that sense, then Mario suggests that we are not necessary, except as a stepping stone. I hope for more. The vision I have is more complex than that. It's more Gaian. I'm convinced that the Earth exists as a living organism, the largest living creature in the solar system. And I'm equally convinced of the fact that its life involves not just the biosphere, but also the atmosphere, the lithosphere. It's not just organic matter, it is everything else. When I look at you, I see nothing that is alive. I see dead hair, dead skin, dead fingernails, dead teeth. We need these things. They're the dead parts of us that make it possible for us to live. In the same way, it's the dead parts, dead and inverted commas, of Earth that make the creature intact, keep it intact. It's the whole fabric that's important. So my reading of this is one which includes the machines as part of the lithosphere, the geosphere, as part of the whole. And everything, I hope, in the end hangs together on the survival of the creature in its infinitude, in which we are simply a bunch of neurons, if you like. We are the conscience at the moment of this creature. We are the sentient edge of its awareness. But we can sharpen that awareness by the addition of this extra dimension being provided by the machine. The dream is that when we finally get it all right, get it all together, it will become something much more than the sum of its parts. And then we'll hear, from way out there, a chorus of voices saying, "Welcome. At last, you've made it." I think we have to stop there. I've been warned that at 9 o'clock exactly the dogs start to bark. Thank you.
Wow, what can I say? The late, great Dr. Lyall Watson. What a guy.
Mark Manning, our podcaster, is here. With lovely blue eyes, looks good in a bikini.
So I'm told, right now it's time for Random Anonymous Strange But True. Your stories, your voices, relating to Ireland and beyond. And our readers today are David McGlynn, Master of the Universe, Shannon McBride, who's a security consultant, a lady who I only know as Denise, but if you go hashtag nearly 70 on TikTok, you will find her. She's a Dublin lady with great stories. In there as well, we've got a guy called Sunjay from Luton, followed up by the lovely, loyal Sarah Campbell, broadcaster and voiceover artist, Northern Ireland based. Here we go. Random, anonymous, strange, but true. Scary era. Pass it on.
Walking my dog one day, I came to a zebra crossing. There was a cardboard moving box with the flaps folded closed on the ground just before you'd step into the crossing. My dog started toward the box and began whimpering, sniffing and pawing at it. I don't think I'd ever seen her so obsessed with something before. I guessed it probably contained some discarded food or meat. I pulled her away and crossed the street when I got the thought, well, what if it's an abandoned baby and it's still alive, and if I don't check, it'll be on the news tonight and I'll never forgive myself. So I turned around with my dog eagerly leading me, and we went back to the box. I carefully unfolded the flaps and looked inside, and all I could see was the beige-coloured back of a cushion lying face down in the box. There was nothing else. I started to leave, but my dog wouldn't move and was barking and wagging her tail at the box. I gave up and gingerly picked up the cushion by a corner and flipped it around. Well, what presented itself on the other side was quite a surprise. A kind of cosmic glitch. The other side of the cushion had an embroidered needlework portrait of a happy dog looking back at me. Not just any dog. If I had taken a photo of my dog and asked someone to make a cushion with her on it, they would have been hard pressed to do better than what was on this random cushion in a box on the street. My friend who was with me said, "That's your dog?" And I was like, "Yeah." We were totally tripped out. I inspected the cushion and it was perfectly clean, with no staining or odour whatsoever. I ended up taking the cushion and my dog was doing little spins of joy as we headed back home. I pulled the cover off the cushion and washed it just to be sure, but it was fine. My dog has long since crossed over the Rainbow Bridge, but even as I write this, I'm looking across at the armchair where the cushion is, and I see her, smiling back at me.
Right, so first of all, I am outside, so the sound might be a bit ambient, but basically, I was waking up one summer's morning, probably not too far distance to the day, about 20 years ago, I want to say. When I was 12, I feel old. And I was kind of half waking up myself. Similar to, I'm not sure if you've seen the butter ad, where your one wakes up whistling and singing at the birds. Well, that was 12-year-old Shannon waking up in the bed. Like a pretty little princess. And then I hear this whispering of, "Shannon! Shannon!" And it was me mother. Which you'd think would be normal, until I tell you that my mother passed away when I was 8. That's weird. And life has never been the same since.
You are actually going to be shocked when you hear this story, but it's a true story. Bear with me till the end. So, story time. Today is my mum's 10th anniversary. I can't believe she's gone that long. But for those of us who, when we think of our loved ones, like to think they're still kind of around us, she left me one of many things she left, but she left me one with a confidence in the fact that there is something in the afterlife. And I wanted to share that story with you today. So my mum was in a nursing home for 13 years before she died. And for various reasons, I was the only one that used to go up to see her. And I'm telling you that not to trouble Kaysa myself, but just because nobody else was giving her any information. So we had our house rented out, and that was to help pay the nursing home. So the woman on one side of the house had died, and since nobody had been up to see my mum for years, I didn't think there was any point in telling my mum that the woman had died, because it would only upset her. And also, the woman across the road had died, and again, nobody told my mum. So I walked into the nursing home room one day, and as I went in, my mum says, I wasn't that terrible sad all the same about poor May. And I said, what about May, ma'am? This is the woman to the side of the house that died. And she says, she died. I said, did she, ma'am? Venus, how did you know that? And she says, well, Kay told me. I said, Kay? So that was Kay across the road. I said, when did you see Kay? Venus, she was already dead. She says, I was going to Mass and I met Kay. And she told me all about poor old May. But sure can never stick to hell with anyone. So go figure. I mean, I nearly fell off the chair with the shock. But one thing, when I thought about it, it was like, she couldn't have known from anybody else. How did she know? And then, what a great legacy, what a great gift to let me know that there was something on the other side that was telling. I leave that with you to ponder.
A girl I was dating, who is now my wife, came over when I was about 19 to 20 years old to my parents' house. She leaves my room and goes to the bathroom, comes back 5 minutes later kind of freaked out. I ask her, what's up? Why are you looking weirded out? She replied, who's the old lady here? I said, the only other lady here is my mum. She said, an old lady, 80s, 90s in a blue nightgown, was smiling at her when she opened the bathroom door. No old lady in my place at all. Fast forward to the morning. We leave my room early and my mother has lots of family photos hanging on the walls. Now my wife points and goes, that's the lady I saw last night. I look over and it's a picture of my great-grandmother who passed away 3 months before. What's really weird is my mother and I were talking maybe a week before this happened, that my great-grandma and grandma would have loved to meet her. Really weirded me out, but I'm glad she got to see my wife.
I grew up in a haunted house. I had an imaginary friend as a kid. I called her Sally. Sally was a little white blonde girl like me. She wore a white party dress with a ribbon around the waist. I thought everyone could actually see their imaginary friends, since that's how it was shown in the cartoons. I played hide and seek with her. She showed me a spot in the closet by the front door, and she told me that no one would find me there. And they never did. And when I played with real kids, I was the champion hider. Eventually, I got older and stopped seeing Sally. I thought that it was a normal part of growing up. As a teenager, I had almost forgotten about Sally until I met a new friend who claimed she could see spirits. Without me having told her about Sally, my friend described a little girl in a white party dress who followed me around the house. My friend said the ghost didn't like to be looked at by anyone but me. While I still lived at home, I invited my boyfriend, now husband, to come over. He'd been over many times before and felt comfortable coming right in. When he opened the door, he noticed that the closet next to the front door was open when it was usually shut. When he looked inside, he yelled in fear. Inside the closet stood a little girl in a raggedy grey dress. Her skin was pasty pale and she had dark pits where her eyes and mouth should have been.
Yeah, a couple of things over the years, but I've learned, well, I suppose it's not learned, I've just become accustomed to it, and I think it's kind of, it's maybe it's another sense or something. But often when you go into places, you'll get a feeling for the place, and you'll get a feeling of whether or not it's comfortable. And whatever causes that, who knows what causes that, but we have an intuition, we have an inbuilt intuition. I can't describe what it is or where it comes from or the physics of it or the chemistry of it, but it's there, and anybody will tell you to stick with your intuition. If you think something doesn't feel right, then don't hang around.
Superb advice from regular contributor to Scary EIRE, David McGlynn, aka The Squire. And don't hang around either. If you've got an Irish paranormal tale to tell, simply email paranormalireland@protonmail.com and it'll be read out for you. Or you get to tell it on air yourself. That's paranormalireland@protonmail.com.
Welcome back to Scary Era, broadcasting from the ancient east coast of Ireland. I am Mark Manning, and I am among you again. I have an aviation paranormal story for you. And I remember hearing it sometime in the early 70s, but it was only recently, when I went online, I had the gist of it confirmed, and it was as follows. So there was an airline pilot, he's long since passed, for that great big airport in the sky. I think his name was Captain Boyer, and he flew transatlantic in maybe the 50s or 60s in these big old, what were they, maybe a Lockheed Constellation or a Boeing 707, some of those early transatlantic airliners in any case. And he was flying along one day, minding his own business up at 35,000 feet, and a rap came on the door. And he opened it, because back then it was pre-9/11. People used to, just, if they wanted to say hello to the pilot, they would, or perhaps a flight attendant. Anyway, he opened the door, and he was met by a couple, and they were very well dressed, and they were possibly late 30s or maybe early middle age, but they had a presence about them, and they said, were very polite, and they said, "Excuse me, can we look at the flight deck?" And, his co-pilot was busy, and Captain Boyer said, "Sure, come on in." So as he was showing them all the controls, etc., he realised they had a total grip of aeronautical affairs. They were really, erudite in the whole area of flight and the aircraft, etc. He was really, really impressed by them. And he noticed as well that they had kind of Russian accents. They were Eastern European. And there was a fragrance of them, a very pleasant, almost perfume-like fragrance, mixed with a bit of, like static or something, is how he described it. And he was very impressed with them, and they said their goodbyes. So as he landed the plane and everybody was getting off, he said to one of the flight attendants, that Russian couple, where are they? Do you know where they're going on to? They were lovely. And the flight attendant said to him, "Captain, I'm not sure what you're talking about. There's no Russians on the roster here, the passenger manifest. There's no Russians. There wasn't any. And not only that, nobody asked to leave their seat." So Captain Boyer was forever left wondering about that mysterious airborne couple. Interestingly as well, you know what? That would have been around the time of the Cold War, 50s and 60s, 70s. So who knows? Oh, speaking of things aviation-like, one of our lovely paranormal investigators, you hear from him all the time on Scary Era, is PJ Kavanagh, and he is about to do a skydive, all in aid of charity, the Galway Hospice Foundation, to be precise. A little bit about PJ. Well, PJ is a cancer survivor, as is his daughter, who's going on the skydive as well. And I think she's taken a friend called Selena. So it's in aid of charity, and if you're listening to this, and you can go to the following, idonate.ie, parachute jump or whatever, or Galway Hospice Foundation, idonate.ie, and if you could give them a few bob, that would really help, because it is all for charity. As a matter of fact, let the hillbillies clarify matters.
Listen up, y'all. Is it a bird? Is it a plane or falling from the sky? No, it's a man, PJ Kavanagh, he's one crazy kind of guy. But not just him, he's got two chicks in tow. Sadie and Celine are also gonna go. They all parachuting and it's all for charity. And as she did looking for money from you and me, you read all about it on idonate.ie or Facebook Paranormal Awakenings. Remember, it's on September 5th and it's all for charity.
That was the Chitalinos. The Chitalinos, and they're currently taking the American country charts by Cam. So, just to restate, PJ Kavanagh of Paranormal Awakenings and his daughter and her friend will be doing a skydive on September the 5th in Galway, and it's all in aid of Galway Hospice Foundation. Please donate. Log on to idonate.ie, or indeed all the details are on the Paranormal Awakenings Facebook page. Yeehaw! So I'll be back in a roly-mo where we'll be discussing the phenomenon known as pathetic fallacy. Right after these short messages, you all. Strap me to a pig and roll me in the mud.
Hi, Jenny Sullivan here. I am the creator and founder of Emerald Isle Paranormal Researchers. You can find our latest investigation of the beautiful and infamous Leap Castle. You can find that on our YouTube page and our Facebook page.
Bertie Brosnan here. Recently did the Scary Era podcast with Mark and I really enjoyed it. Hopefully you can listen to that podcast as well. But I'm a filmmaker, author and video producer for anyone that doesn't know me. You can get all my information, all my links at www.bertiebrosnanfilms.com, including my recent book, The Forgotten Prince, a novella detailing Brian Boru, the Battle of Clontarf, his son Donica and Brodier of Man, the villain of the piece. This is a part of a trilogy and I'm writing the sequel at the moment. You can get it via my shop, www.bertiebrosnanfilms.com, or just go on to Amazon and type in The Forgotten Prince, Bertie Brosnan, and it should come up. Thank you so much. Take care. Enjoy the rest of the show.
If you like our Scary Era podcast, please like and subscribe. Also, if you have any comments or ideas, contact Paranormal Ireland at protonmail.com. Right then, back to the podcast.
Hello again, my little bollocky boos. I would like to discuss now the phenomenon of pathetic fallacy. I really should stop doing that because it's not funny at all. It's not amusing any of you. It's just me. It's just every time I say the word phenomenon, I go phenomena. Do you remember that old song? You probably don't. Anyway, pathetic fallacy. What exactly is it? Pathetic fallacy is a literary device where human feelings, emotions and traits are given to nature, weather or non-living objects. Writers use this technique to match the environment with a character's mood or to build a specific scene or atmosphere. Meaning of the name. Well, the origin of it. Do you really want to know this? Well, sure, why not? You learn something every day here. Coined by Victorian critic John Ruskin in his book Modern Painters from 1856. Pathetic comes from pathos, parentheses, emotion, meaning relating to feelings, not pitiful or weak. Fallacy means a false notion because inanimate objects do not actually feel emotions. I suppose the late Dr Lyall Watson would care to differ. Anyway, I digress. Examples: angry storm, dark loud thunder rolling in to match a character's rage, weeping rain, raindrops tapping on a window to reflect sadness or grief, friendly sun. By the way, we've just had the eclipse here in Ireland. It was a bit of a letdown. Yeah, I went out there a while ago. Oh, there was more happening on television than there seemed to be in Ireland, but anyway, maybe that was just me. Friendly sun, bright sunshine smiling down during a happy event. Now, two examples that come to my own mind were, and I did mention Jerry Ryan, the late Irish broadcaster. He was very gifted and very charismatic. And indeed, when I was talking to psychic medium Carmel Conway from Galway recently, she was mentioned earlier in the show in relation to Marvin, my cat, she was telling me that, Jerry Ryan had at times been in touch with her from beyond the grave. After he passed, I felt compelled to go up to the national broadcaster where they had a book of condolences. And as we all queued, all us listeners, the heavens opened with the most monsoon-like, I distinctly remember it, rain. And it just matched the occasion. So, pathetic fallacy, perhaps?
What a sad tosser.
And then again, about 6 years ago, I was asked to give the eulogy of my best friend, Stephen. Stephen and I go back a long way. We were friends since we were 12 years of age. But not Stephen's eulogy, that of his mother's. the late Nora. And Nora was great. She was not only his mother, but she was like a second mother to me and indeed my wife. And Christmases were always very special because Nora would have us all round the house. And she's passed away. But she had a fascination and a passion for butterflies all her life. And in many of the conversation I had with her, she would allude to butterflies and how their fantastic fluttering totally beguiled her, and she loved them, and she loved to discuss the different types, like the admiral butterfly or whatever, and the colours were so vibrant. She would wax lyrical about butterflies. Anyway, so I'm giving the eulogy, right? The church is kind of standing room only because she was so popular. And as I'm giving it, I noticed on the wall adjacent to her coffin was this beautiful, vibrant, you know those kind of yellow creamy ones? Butterfly. And every so often it would delicately bat its little wings, flutter its wings as it gripped up to the wall. Other members of the family were seeing the same thing, and we're all kind of looking at each other. And you know, just, not a word of a lie, just as I finished the eulogy, up flew the butterfly from the wall and alighted gently on Nora's coffin, where it bat its little wings for a bit and then settled for quite a while. And as I came down off the podium and got back into the pews, too much information, but one of Nora's daughters said to me, Mark, did you see it? I said, how could I miss it? You know, and it was really a case of pathetic fallacy. Now, I'll be back with you in just a moment because we need to discuss something that's a little bit distasteful but needs to be addressed all the same. So I don't blame you if you will switch off during that item, but as I said, it needs to be addressed. And that's it, or shinny, as we say, for this episode of Scary Era Paranormal Podcast in association with Paranormal UK radio station and unexplained.ie. My thanks to all the contributors. Do get in touch for any items at all, paranormalireland@protonmail.com. Now look, there's an elephant in the room. There's no delicate way of putting this, right? The 6-year-old in you might like it, but I don't. And it's been brought to my attention, and it was quite embarrassing because I got a number of males and females, but you know what I mean, emails, and they were complaints, and they basically said to me, are you breaking wind during the show? And no, I'm not. And I said, well, you know, I emailed back, said, well, get specific. I don't know what you're talking about. And they did. And I'm totally baffled. So if you could just listen to a section of the last podcast we had, it's probably less than a minute long. But listen out, particularly after I say, I think the words squelch and languages or something. Just listen in. So this is from our last episode of Scary Era. I've had a number of complaints. Have a listen. Get a fix on and then they'd be gone, and there was a squelchy noise and atmospherics after dark. And it was amazing because the world seemed a lot bigger than it is now, and it let your imagination run riot as to what else was out there, the possibilities, mysterious noises, accents, languages. Now, before I say anything else, I totally apologise if you've been offended by that, but I've had nothing at all whatsoever to do with it. I'm quite technical, audio-wise. None of my family are really, and there's only me here in this home studio. And I've gone through everything, so I don't know. I'm baffled. Perhaps I've been hacked into by some kind of audio baddie, and it's really leaving a bad smell, pardon the pun. I don't know. I'm sorry. It appears, ladies and gentlemen, we have a paranormal phantom farter on this show, and it's not on. Yeah. So look, if you come across any instances of it, just let me know where. And email me, of course, paranormalireland@protonmail.com, and I will do my best to rectify matters. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed the show. Did you? Did you not? By the way, my show is a kind of different show. And what makes me different, I think, is I think of the paranormal as in tandem with us. It feels it's here on a different level. And every so often, you know, we will tap in or tap out of it. We'll hit the right frequency, whatever. So I don't always go on with the big dramatic voice and all this kind of Hollywood nonsense that you're expecting to hear. I don't. And the thing is, I am one of the few paranormal broadcasters who've actually seen something. Most of the investigators here, and they're great, but they'll tell you most of the time they don't see anything. They haven't seen anything. I know Matthew Clark saw orbs and what have you, and other anomalies, as well as some of our other contributors. But so many people put a podcast together and they've never actually seen anything. So therefore, if I don't take it too seriously, maybe it'll become a serious podcast. I don't know, but I believe in having a bit of a laugh and being entertaining. And if it's not for you, you can always switch off, but I certainly hope you don't. So yeah, sorry about that, and hopefully we won't have the Phantom Farter again. Until the next Scary Era Paranormal podcast, take care, 'cause I care.